Hi, so it was February 2022. Vladimir decided to start a war in Ukraine.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
Of course, everybody decided to condemn Vladimir except for China and India, lol. And we massively sanctioned the hell out of them, leading to a rise in energy prices. At the same time, on my then Packet Bell Media S with an older Intel Core i5, I noticed how much CPU the operating system Windows 10 was using and how many times it crashed. June 2022, I switched from Windows 10 to Linux Mint, and it went quite well. Even to this day, I really do love Linux and all its reliability. But I'm going to be looking at it in a bit more detail because in February 2026, Donald Trump started a war in Iran.
They don't like the word war because you're supposed to get approval, so I'll use the word military operation.
Energy prices are through the roof again, and people are condemning the US and boycotting the US ever since 2025. Meanwhile, Windows 11 is only getting worse. To put it shortly, Windows... on my side laptop, which is still running Windows 11, I've got BSOD after crash after crash after spyware after AI, which I do not intend to use. The co-pilot that Microsoft decided to throw in there. Notepad, Slowpilot, seriously, what the f*** are you thinking? Right at the very moment where everything else is currently getting more and more efficient, Windows is getting more buggy, more unstable, more spyware written, and more AI bloated. What the? So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about how it is using Linux for, at this point, quite close to 4 years. So, first of all, there are quite a lot of Linux distributions beyond just the most memeified ones, which are Arch and Gentoo. Like amateur radios, there is apparently KB10IQ for gaming. There's CachyOS for ethical hacking. There is Kali Linux. For those who are just going to get started, there's Ubuntu is a very popular one. Linux Mint is another very popular, and there are also newcomers like Pop! OS from System 76, which is an American company, but it is a free operating system, so you're not really buying anything. And newcomer Zorin OS, whose parent company is officially located in Ireland. So that's an interesting one, especially since they have... So some of the most obvious advantages of Linux are that it is almost always free, no strings attached, open source, which also means that a lot of people checking on the code and make sure that it's all perfectly safe and secure as much as it can be. And of course it's very highly customizable beyond just wallpapers and applications and stuff, but it's also incredibly energy and memory efficient. When I were to look at the resource monitor of my computer whilst it's at idle, I've actually seen figures around and about 2 gigabytes of memory use out of 8. That's not quite a bit, but it's much less than the 80% of memory that Windows and all of its associated applications use at idle mostly. Linux just plain works. The only incident I've ever had with Linux was a little bit recently. I was trying to get my 3DS to work again after some crashing and stuff. I tried to recover something. On the 3dshacks.guide website, they did have like a little section on how to recover. I went there, and I just downloaded a special program that would check the SD card if it's safe to continue using it. I tried to compile it. Apparently you had to compile it yourself. However, running the makefile script practically destroyed my entire personal space. Just my personal space, though, and I do have a backup of that. So I was just able to keep going relatively quickly. So you do sometimes have to be very careful with what you run and what you do, but most of the time programs just plain work. I open them up and they just do whatever they're supposed to do. Without any questions, without having two fucking episodes on the start of the day right after each other as I was literally doing nothing, without having to wait 10 fucking minutes for a few dozen background applications to start up and the system to finally settle down for use. Just perfect. Yeah. And even though Linux was created in the 1990s by literally a couple computer nerds for a 386 computer, and it was only used by computer enthusiasts throughout the 90s and the early 2000s. Nowadays, it is very easy to install. I've actually had to do that 3 times, and every time it worked perfectly. So obviously I put it on my first Packard Bell computer, and I put it on my Lenovo ThinkCentre, and then I had to upgrade from, I think it was 20 to 22 version. This is so stable and I feel so secure using Linux that, like, from an information standpoint, that I literally only upgrade between version numbers. So that's not the service pack, but it's the full system. When the current version I'm using is out of support. And in general, I think that's a pretty great thing to do, unless you have really demanding hardware or software. Just, you know, upgrade whenever you have to, and rely on your system to work properly in between those upgrades. So yeah, for most Windows applications, there is actually an alternative over on Linux as well. For instance, you have GIMP for Photoshop, Inkscape for Illustrator, Shortcut I use in place of VLCC. Of course, the standard browser is Mozilla Firefox, though there are alternatives now for that as well. And yeah, and there is LibreOffice, which is a free package of Office applications, very similar to Microsoft Office 365, except without the bullshit that obviously consumes way more than you ever should in your home. So yeah, it is a very complete package if you just want to get some work done or want to have some fun with Linux and native games. However, when we're talking about Windows games on Linux, the situation can be a bit peculiar. Yeah, I played Linux Mint. I played The Sims 3 using Steam Proton for a while, and it worked fine. Until recently, when I tried to open Sims 3, the EA app just didn't really want to work anymore. However, a simple reinstall every time I wanted to use it was enough to fix the problem. So yeah, if Windows is practically dead at this point, and I'm not that big of a macOS fan, Linux is practically perfection at this point. Outside of games, there is not a lot that you're gonna miss. I mean, my cloud platform, Fiddle.io, has a Linux application. Slack has a Linux application. Cobas doesn't have a Linux application, but I can run it just as well as a web application. Signal has a native Linux application. VLC Media Player has a native Linux application. Bitwarden, a very good password manager, also has a native Linux application. And even if you have some applications that absolutely must run under Windows for whatever reason, well, there's virtual machines, and you can create a little dual boot partition. I used to have mine for some time to play The Sims and some other games. However, I practically think at this point that I could just as well remove it completely. Because, well, do I really need it? I mean, most of my games run fine through emulators, virtual machines, or Steam Proton, which is technically also emulated, but yeah. It's one of the most well-known ones. So, am I really gonna miss Windows? Well, not Windows 11. But I did end up signing my desktop computer eventually, kind of like Windows XP, because, well, that is the last good version of Windows, along with Windows 7. Like, it is the best version of Windows that I have ever really known in my life. Even Windows 7 has been a bit unstable quite sometimes, and especially with older software. So overall, Linux is not really something weird or scary or anything. In fact, it runs most of the world's servers. It runs Android, is based on Linux, even though it has some Google bullshit thrown on top. Many embedded systems use Linux, and the Raspberry Pi uses Linux, and I've used that before. And about 6% of desktop users nowadays use Linux as well, especially when older versions of Windows cannot be upgraded to Windows 11 because of memory constraints, CPU limitations, or TPM bullshit. And in those cases where you can't or don't really want to upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11, which honestly you shouldn't, except if there's like really good reasons, like non-games that don't work on Linux at all. There are a couple of games that I can tell that don't really work on Linux either, even with Steam Proton or Virtual Machine, and those are online games that have anti-cheat measures built in. So if you don't really use any of those, I honestly think that you could go live your life exclusively on a Linux distribution. Now, I'm not really going to tell you which distribution you should choose. I'm just going to tell you that Linux Mint, for me, has been just smooth sailing for about 4 years up until this point. Very close to 4 years. And see you another time. Bye-bye. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you do, please give a thumbs up and share this video with all your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing to my channel. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.